Good afternoon and welcome to this video. I will be discussing ways to travel affordably or on a limited budget, or for some people, no budget at all. Um, so basically, because of the COVID, I haven't traveled. I didn't travel for like a year as far as flying, or even over a year. So I accumulated points through surveys. Now, there is the surveys, when you redeem them, you can get airline points. There's other things you can get, hotels, restaurants, magazines. There's all kinds of things that you can redeem the points for. So I have a tendency to redeem them for airline points, although there are other things that you can redeem that are just as interesting or good, gift cards. So um, so that's partially how I travel, is with these points. Then I can use them to fly. So at the beginning of the year, I went to Kentucky to volunteer at the Christian Appalachian Project in Kentucky. And so I got there by, I actually took a train there, from Chicago because it was affordable. So that's kind of how I got there. And then, of course, that there is a program for Amtrak that you can get points. So um, I'm on the Amtrak points, the program there. And so I had to do that because it was kind of a smaller area, and so I couldn't. It wasn't really close to like an airport, real close, and so I did that, there and back. I did have to take a bus to Chicago, but I did take a train. And the accommodations, I stayed there for a week, and since I was volunteering, they accommodated me, and I shared a kitchen and a front room and a bathroom, but I had my own room. So that was kind of nice. I think it's kind of hard to find, like if you're volunteering, it might be kind of hard to find accommodations and to volunteer. So I was there for a week. And then my next travel experience, I did go to Maine. And with going to Maine, I did have points. For some reason, I've always wanted to go to Maine. So I did go to Maine, and I've been to both Portlands now, the one in Oregon and the one in Portland, Maine. And so I accumulated points, and I flew straight to Maine, and then I stayed at a hotel. And I have accumulated, like, for, I think it's hotels.com, and I did accumulate enough hotel stays to stay one night, free, but that was based on the average of hotel nights, how much it cost, and that was for a later. That's going to be for a later trip in Vegas. But anyway, so I went to Maine, and I flew to Maine, and then I wasn't there that long. I was only there for like maybe 3 days, but I was somewhat kind of surprised that, I mean, they had these cobblestone uh, sidewalks. And so I was kind of surprised because and they had a small kind of waterfront, but it reminded me a lot of Seattle, but this was like, and even Portland, Maine, or Portland, Oregon, excuse me. So that was kind of interesting. They still had the kind of the hippie kind of motive there in some of the stores, which I was a little surprised. So it was very similar to the Pacific Northwest, I felt. Um, so so I wasn't there that long, and just a couple days. But the hostel I stayed at was really cool. It was there's only one that I know of in Portland, Maine, and it was very just gorgeous. The way it was built, it was just really a great hostel. And so on upon returning, it was I didn't fly out of Maine to come back to the Midwest. So what I did is I thought, okay, well, it's cheaper to fly out of Boston. So I went from Maine, Portland, Maine, to Boston, and then I stayed one night at a hostel or whatever. Actually, I've stayed there, the same hostel in the same room before a couple years earlier, so that was interesting. So I flew out of Boston, but then I ended up I had to leave. I think it was like a Saturday or Sunday. I think it was a Sunday, and so the earliest train was that I don't know if I would have made my flight. So I ended up taking a taxi, and from my hostel to Boston Logan Airport, and it was quite expensive. I think I paid like I don't know. I think it was like $70. I'm not sure, but I guess that it's quite expensive out there, and I wasn't that far away. I would say maybe 5 miles. I'm not sure. Um, so, and so after that was done, I thought, well, you know what, it would have just been cheaper for me just to fly from Maine back to my home state. But I didn't know that the taxis were that expensive because the last time I went to Boston, I just took the train, or whatever, and to the airport or whatever. So the train, and then well, I also took a bus too. That's right, I also took a bus. So if you're, you know, in Boston and you take a taxi, be prepared because it's going to cost a little more. But well, so I learned a couple things or whatever. But so that's kind of what I did. Um, I try to stay in hotels if I can. I meant but I think I just spent the night in Boston and then I left the next morning. So, yeah, so it was basically, I'm not sure if that would have, that's kind of what I ended up doing. Um, and then when I went to Virginia this year, I had a relative recommend this campground. So I ended up taking a train there, and from Chicago, because Chicago is the Amtrak is, you can earn points there, but it's a very large airport, or not airport, train station. Compared to other train stations, it's almost like a mini airport, but it's the train. So I can get like prices under $100 if it's like under, like so much in advance, so many weeks in advance. Sometimes I can get a good deal. So I ended up going um, there to Richmond. It was Richmond, but I ended up going close by there. And so, yeah, and then on the way back, I used, to come back, I got a lift from where it was the campground to Richmond. But I used, with Greyhound, and I don't think a lot of people know about this, but there's a road rewards program. And if you do 16 one ways within a year, then you can get a free round trip ticket anywhere in the United States. So 16 one ways is hard to get. I mean, you'd have to be taking the bus at least once a month round trip. And so it doesn't, I mean, if you, it's just one. So like if you go from one destination to another, that's one. It doesn't matter where it is or how far. So, so that was, surprisingly, I was able to, I was moving stuff, so I was making more trips than usual. And so on the way back, I left, um, I used my free ticket, my Road Rewards ticket, and they give you up to a year, I think, to use that ticket, or to get use your free ticket. But I noticed, and I didn't know about this. I thought, okay, well, with Greyhound, like the night before, you can go and exchange your ticket for $20, with $20 for a different date. And um, I don't know if that's for the non-refundable tickets. I don't usually change the date, but I found out that because I had some difficulty because it was a technically a free round trip ticket, and so because the amount that I paid was zero, but and I paid the taxes or whatever, I had some issues with that as far as changing it, which so just be prepared that like if you do for whatever reason get a road rewards um, round trip free ticket that that you it'd be good to make sure that you have the exact dates and about for traveling. So that's kind of how I use that, and then so there's the Road Rewards program, and there is a thing for Amtrak, and Amtrak. I love taking the train. Actually, that's my favorite form of travel. Um, so it's just very peaceful and nostalgic, and there's just I usually am in coach, it's just but there's usually room, leg room anyway, and depending on what trip, I'm in, most of the time I have the whole seat to myself, but sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on how far I'm going and the destination. So, and then, so my most recent trip, excuse me, I had to return to the Midwest for business. It was more of a business trip. So, I had to take a bus to Vegas, and then from Vegas, I flew to the Midwest and back. And that entire trip for flying, I used points except for the $5.36 for the taxes and the fees and the security thing that you have to pay, and that's just one way. So it was 11.20 or whatever. But so the thing about like with the lower points, of course is pretty obvious that usually I've noticed that it's to get a lower points, it's usually early morning or later at night. So it's kind of it's of course you can use more points if you wanted to, but that's kind of the cheapest I've noticed with the points. And then and I did spend the night in Vegas prior to leaving, and then prior to coming back, I spent one night. Basically because the bus transportation is like once a day, and it didn't really. I'm thankful for it, but I had to spend the night, and so I stayed at a hotel 2 or 3 miles from the airport. I just called a taxi. I didn't really want to take the buses or anything. And then upon returning, I spent the night at a hostel. And I usually try to stay at a hotel, but every now and then, it was just one night. I did that in Boston with me, just because it's just spending one night. And it was hard to find. This is like I looked like a week or 2 weeks in advance for a hotel, but it was on the weekend in Vegas, so it was hard to find a hotel that wasn't close to Vegas. It was a little further out, which would have been okay, but I had to be somewhere the next day in the afternoon, and I just thought it would be easier if I just stayed at the hostel. because it was right in Vegas. So that accommodation, well, I mean, it was just, bunk beds or whatever, and it was a mixed dorm. So, but that was free because with hotels.com, I paid so many nights at a hotel, and then I got one night free. So the way that worked, and I didn't know this, I thought, okay, well, I got a free night at a hotel. So I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be a great, hotel, right? Well, what they did is they average it. So you spend 10 nights or 10 nights at a hotel. You have a year to do it, and then but they take the average of how much you paid per night. So it was like 70 something dollars. It wasn't that much. But still, I meant, being on a budget and being cheap like I am, and just so I used it, the free accommodation. I didn't have to pay anything to stay at the hostel. I think there's probably, of course, a tax fee or whatever. So just to let you know, if you hotels.com, the average amount that you pay. That's how they determine how much the hotel, your free hotel night will be. I thought so. Anyway, but anyway, so I mean, I don't know. I personally never know when, in case of emergency like this. I had to go out of town, and I had to do this, so it was it was a business trip, but I had to get this done. So it came in handy. So all I paid for was, well, I paid for the taxis for the, going and coming to the airport, and then I paid for that one night in prior to leaving Vegas. But still, it's Vegas. So it was, it was pretty good. I mean, I'm glad. It was pretty affordable, I would say. So that's kind of how I do it. I mean, with, earning points, with, it doesn't necessarily have to be surveys. I'm sure that with airlines, of course, they have businesses where you can buy things through their stores or whatever. You have to go on the airline's website, and then there's also buying, for dinners. You get so much points. But with me, it's easier to do surveys and just do it that way. And I've had these points accumulating, partially because of the COVID. I didn't fly anywhere for at least a year. So, and then Amtrak, I love Amtrak, and I meant, you get points for traveling there too, but it all adds up. I meant, sometimes with me, I don't know, you never know when you're going to need those points. And so that's kind of that's how I've traveled, and I've had my aunt and some other people say, well, a friend, well, I don't know how you do it. Well, it takes a hell of a lot of energy, first of all, because I mix things up. It's usually, sometimes it can be I'm flying, then I'm taking a train, then, sometimes Greyhound's in there too. But I like a little variety. And I love the train. That's my favorite. If I had to choose, the train is my number one favorite choice, and then flying, and then Greyhound. Sorry, Greyhound, but I just, those are my favorites as far as getting to point A and point B. And I love taking ferries too. But anyway, and there's also, you can buy points. I'm sure you guys, most people kind of know that you can buy points. And, if you're kind of short on points, like right now, I want to go to New York, and I am short points. So I thought, well, they won't let me use my, I have travel funds, but they won't let me use that, and they want like a card. So I was like, well, I don't know if I want, because I just spent, I just did all these trips, this year, and I was like, well, so then now I'm waiting on, I found another airline that I'm like 500 points short to fly to New York for New Year's. The Times Square. I've been trying to get out there for 3 years now, and I always book it book the hotel and then I have to cancel. Of course, last year they didn't have it; they had the virtual. So I was like, I did not. I used the points I had for another flight, and I was like, so now I need 500 points. I'm trying to scram to get those points so that I can go because after the 25th, December 25th, they're just jacking up the points. The prices are just up. So but I'm very close to Vegas, and either way, I'm in Vegas. I went to Vegas one, one New Year's, and it's either New York and Vegas are the top as far as New Year's. So either one, but I just couldn't believe that I used my points for another airline, and then I find out this other airline, all I needed was 500 points, and I could have got one way to New York, and I'm not for sure how I would have gotten back. I don't know. I'm sure I would have, paid that or whatever. So I have the travel funds. so, anyway, so yeah, it can be an adventure. And I meant when I was younger, I was more spontaneous, and I meant it was cheaper to rent weekly at like a motel, and I did do that once or twice, and then I did stay at this one motel like in the middle of nowhere for like a month, but it's kind of harder to do because they've jacked up the prices. I think they're kind of steering away from renting weekly, and some of those places aren't real great to stay. But as far as now, and so that I usually try to make sure everything's paid for prior to leaving because sometimes you just don't know. And I mean, I'm not, I mean, I just rather, when I was younger, I would just kind of show up and stay at a hostel and, kind of see what happened or whatever. But um, it's just, I kind of prefer now to kind of, make sure everything is paid for, just about everything is set up to, for me, so I don't have to worry as much. And then you throw in the COVID, and sometimes it just doesn't. I mean, I've had to cancel trips because um, for whatever reason, partially because of the COVID. I didn't really want to travel by plane and this and that, and there was some other medical issues I had that. So anyway, this is how I travel. This is how I've been traveling for years. I know some people are like, I mean, they like to have the nicer hotels, and that's fine. I mean, if you have the money to have a nice hotel, then more power to you. I like the hotel as long as I prefer, of course, to be clean and a half decent neighborhood. And now I kind of want just like a pool. And that's kind of all about it. I just want to make sure that those three things, because I don't want to be, because the last time I went to Vegas, it was kind of in a sketchy neighborhood, but I mean, I was kind of, I had to get, it was a business. So, business trip more so. So I think that those are the things, but if you've got the money to, go to a nice hotel and have all these amenities, and more power to you. I meant me and my one of my friends were like, because her and her husband go all out, but um, I don't spend too much time at the hotel. I just like when I come back or whatever, I just kind of like to watch TV and rest, but I try to be gone most of the time. But anyway, so this is how I've traveled for years. It is good. I meant, to be spontaneous if that's what you like to do. If you have friends, for some reason, I always travel alone. Not always alone, but sometimes I meet people. I meant that like I'll meet you here, kind of thing. But people like sometimes I notice that people kind of travel with other people, and so that's more fun, of course. And so, but so it can be whatever more spontaneous or whatever. But I don't know. This kind of how I do it. This is how I travel or whatever. Um, so I guess listening for if you have any comments or any other I don't know suggestions or anything you'd like to add, then feel free to leave a comment. Thank you. Bye.